Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. I'm your host, Citizen Strife, and this week we will take a look at another anime, this one entitled Land of the Lustrous. So, last week I recorded Tales of Berseria in lieu of finishing up Tales of Arise. So, still working on that, and again, I think Tales of Arise is going to be its own review eventually someday. Probably not as I finish, but, someday. In the meantime, I finally figured out how that little mess of doing guests on my podcast sort of thing works. It's been an ongoing journey, so to speak, for a while now. As stated a few weeks ago, we tried to get a recording done with one of my guests. They couldn't barely hear me speak over Discord, which was our preferred method of getting the interview done. The microphone I'm using now, the Rode Procaster, for those if I haven't mentioned this before, is having issues on Discord trying to get voice chat. So on their end, the end of the receiving person, they would hear about half the words that I would get. So it would be fine recording on my own purposes, but for them, it wouldn't work. But I was able to find what was known as an Antlion mod mic wireless. So you take a set of headphones that you like, you put a magnetic strip on one side, and then you plop a headset microphone basically on it, and then run it through a USB. And it turns out that might be the solution, because for purposes for Dungeons & Dragons via Roll20 and any other Discord that I've been using it for, it's been able to work both for Discord and for my recording software. So the only real difference is this microphone has a lot more heft to it. It's, a chunky microphone versus a headset mic, so bear that in mind. But if I do have guests and if I'm able to record, well, I'm going to be using that method. And hey, get some guests on here. If that's the solution, that'd be awesome. It's just another avenue for me to use to get that going. As far as that's mostly probably game reviews. The anime reviews will probably be still separate, but we'll go with that as it goes. I still think the schedules are going to stay the same, but if I am able to nail down some guests, I'll try to put those episodes up early. The only episode I think I do want to do on time would be the Cowboy Bebop episodes or not next month, but November. The Netflix anime or adaptation or live action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop has gotten a lot of rounds lately, and they're going to be releasing it on November 19th, I believe. So I'm going to want to do an anime review of that one, of the old version, and then watch the new version as it comes out and do a recording then. Other than that, though, I don't really have any super plans other than, I'd say, the MetaCon review. So those are set in stone. The other ones, not really, so I've kept them as tentative, barring whether I can get guests or not. But for now, we'll stick with what we have scheduled on my list. And up today is Land of the Lustrous. This is an anime that came out in 2017, I believe, based on a manga from 2014. I'd say it was a decently popular show. People really liked it, even though it was only one season. A lot of shows haven't really done the 24 to 52 episode thing unless they're like absolutely sure they're going to be a hit. So a lot of stuck with the 12 episodes, get in, get out sort of mentality. And it has some benefits and some issues I will go over. As far as the show itself, though, the thing that will immediately strike me and immediately strike anybody who does watch it is the visuals and how they process it. This was done in all 3D, so three-dimensional animation, CG, so 3D CG, and it has its benefits in a lot of different ways. I would say color scheme-wise and dynamic just presentation of action scenes, but it's still what I would consider more of a drama and a comedy. But when the action scenes do hit, they do hit spectacularly. There is a lot to go in, and it has to do with the setting that is involved. The settings and the characters are some of the more unique than I've ever seen, and really carry the show. I think what again carries the show is that split of comedy and drama. I've said before that certain dramas have a little bit of comedy. Some comedies are just pure comedy. I would say this is about 60% drama, 40% comedy, but it's not like forced comedy unless it's like a downer moment, a break in the action. So there's about 4 or 5 different story beats that really take control of the narrative. And a lot of it is serious, but they do give you some downtime to get to know the characters or just have a little bit of fun. So if you like comedy and drama together, this is probably going to be a good show for you to watch, again, aside from the visual spectacle. So the plot. I'll go over plots and characters first. The way this would work, the best way I would describe this is a future where humans no longer exist. There's no time frame as to when. We don't even know how big of a place the world that the main characters even inhabit. All we know is it's somewhere in a field with a beach, and there's when it's winter time, there's a snowy artifact, but it's basically like a beachfront school, if for lack of better term. It's desolate under most circumstances because humans no longer exist. What exists instead are 3 separate types of beings. The main being our main characters, the gems. What the gems are genderless, I would say humanoid structured beings. They look female, but they're technically genderless. There are about 30 of them in total, give or take. And we follow them as separate beings. The interesting thing is they delve into gemstones a little bit. If you've done with gemstones as part of like jewelry and such, that's what I'm talking about. So diamonds, topaz, that sort of stuff, sapphire, those kinds of things. So each character is named based on the gemstone that they exhibit, and each of them has a different hardness. So they even go into the hardness scale of them. They are aware of how hard they are. They're aware of how they interact with each other based on that hardness, because there are only about 30 of them. The show will show you how they get created basically later on. It's an interesting way they go about it, but for lack of a better term, they exist as they are, these humanoid beings that are made of gems. If they lose part of themselves, they can be reattached, so they are immortal unless they are attacked, and I would say ground up. So their major antagonists would be known as Lunarians. The Lunarians are what I would consider force of nature beings. The idea would be they come in mass. They fit on this like floating platform of clouds, right? And they look like just like Buddhist figures. Like if you've ever seen a Buddhist statue in a temple, whether in Japan or India or China or some other place, these just like fanciful looking puff cloud beings. That's the best way I can describe them. They don't really speak. They do have some emotion, but more than anything, they are just mean. They seek and destroy the gemstones for purposes, whether better weaponry, whether just for the fact that they are gems, that they're luxury items. Because as I've said, aside from the fact that they look human, like they are made of gems, so they are valued beings. So you have the gems on one side, and then the Lunarians on another. So the gems have to figure out how to fight these things before they get destroyed and captured. On the third end, and this is towards the midpoint of the show, is, how would I pronounce this? These ones are pronounced way differently. They're sort of like jellyfish, fleshy beings. Admirabilis. Admiralibus is the best way I can come up with it. It's an interesting term. Admiralibus, or bliss. It's very interesting concept. The Admiralibus set of jellyfish type beings. They could come in the form of snails or just weird fleshy things that inhabit the sea. The show will go into what each set of being is and how it relates to humanity and how humanity is no longer existing. But you have the gems inhabiting the land, the Lunarians inhabiting the moon, and in their case, the sky, whenever they come down to fight, and the Admiralibus, which inhabit the sea. Of these, you have these, I guess you could call them warring factions of sets. They're trying to survive in their own way. What is not really known is the Admiralibus or the Lunarians' missions, because a lot of this is told from the gemstones perspective. So within the 12 episodes, you have these three sets of beings fighting amongst each other or defending themselves for different purposes. And it's told through the lens of a character known as Phosphophilite, or Foss. I will use Foss as shorthand for now. This show was dubbed by Sentai Filmworks, which was an offshoot of ADV Films from, I'd say, the mid to late 90s to 2000s, before Funimation kind of took over a lot of their not esteem, the little bit of a background. When anime was first being dubbed in America, the main studio, at least the one that would get like stuff like Evangelion or other big shows at the time, was known as ADV Films. You had other offshoots. Pioneer would take over around the mid 2000s and get a lot of stuff from the LA branch of actors. So stuff like Cowboy Bebop and whatever would be under Gainion or Pioneer, right? So Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, whatever, those would be from an LA branch of voice actors mostly. There was one in Canada known as Viz Media. They were responsible for Inuyasha and such, so Canadian voice actors. The majority of anime was dealt with by Texas voice actors. So you would have two different, I guess not warring, because if you're an actor, you're an independent contractor in that sense. So you'd either work for Funimation, which was starting around 1997, 1998, or a little earlier was known as ADV Films. So they were responsible for, again, stuff like Evangelion and such. So that group of actors would be kind of around the same area. So you'd get a lot of like interaction with people who were doing both Funimation and ADV. Later on, Funimation became a much bigger entity, which we know now is kind of the main dub company since around 2006, 2007, since then. But any actor who was part of ADV either still works for Funimation and still does. There's nothing wrong with that. But on a smaller scale, the ADV Films department went to a new company known as Sentai Filmworks. So anything from like late to aughts to early 2010s would be under Sentai Filmworks. So anything not dubbed by Funimation would usually either be dubbed by people who do Netflix stuff or these guys. So a lot of actors you may not know. I'll go over some of the more notable ones, or at least the main characters. But that's my gauge of them. If you don't watch Funimation's app, you will most likely watch either Crunchyroll or High Dive. Sentai Filmworks tends to do High Dive, and I watch it through Verve. That's how I was able to watch this show. Long story short, there are different dub companies, so there's different actors involved. So I may not know as much about them as I would normally because they're just not as prevalent an act as a dub company. So Funimation does like 80 to 90% of this. This is like, the other 5 or 10%, if not Netflix stuff. So there we go. Long story short, different dub company, different actors, and so that's where I'm coming from. But back to Land of the Lustrous, we have Phosphophilite. She's voiced by Sarah Weidenheft. This was the kind of the big main role that she was known for, but she's been in some other stuff like Interview Monster Girls and How Heavy a Dumbbells Do You Lift, and more comedic shows than that. This was the one where she got to be kind of the main voice for the main character, and Foss is our viewpoint character, our main protagonist, and she starts off as a slacker. So Phosphophilite is given a hardness rating of 3.5. So one of the most brittle gemstones that is there. And as a character, she's just a plain slacker. She's a dreamer and she wants to do things, but she complains a lot. She's the whiny, why are you letting me do anything? And it's like, well, what do you want to do? Well, she wants to fight, but she can't because she can't pick up a sword or anything like that. She would basically be destroyed within no seconds flat because of her hardness rating. And she doesn't really do a whole lot at the beginning of the show. However, she is given a task by a character known as Sensei Kongo, voiced by Brian Mathis. And Brian Mathis has this, like, the best way I would describe it would be authoritative yet soft and caring voice. Like, you hear it once and you're just like, ooh, okay. So if you ever watched Ancient Magus Bride, he's also the main character of that show, and it's kind of the same voice. It's the same style of voice. The idea with Sensei Kongo is he is the leader of the gemstones, and he's not really a gemstone of himself. In fact, they make a plot point about what he actually is. And he would be what you would... I talked about the Buddhist imagery. He looks like a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist priest kind of thing. And he's meditating all the time, but when he wakes up, he is in control. And the funniest part is when he's not awake, they have some comedy of like him just rolling around in the building and breaking stuff to fall asleep. But when he's awake and when he needs to fight, he can basically just like snap his fingers and whatever he wants happens. So he is the all-powerful god to these people, and he acts as a protector of the gemstones, but not in a way that he's super authoritative. I mean, they know his power, but he also takes great pains to care for them. So he's on the side of the gemstones versus the Lunarians, and he's called in whenever shit hits the fan, and he's able to kind of give them different tasks. Again, this is kind of like a school or a dormitory, like a live-in dorm kind of place. So everybody can either be, you fight the Lunarians, you study them, you just protect the school. Everybody's kind of given a role. So Foss, knowing that she's one of the weakest ones, she's not really given a role for a long time. And we're talking hundreds of years, right? Because these things are, as long as they don't get hurt, are essentially immortal. So Sensei Kongo gives her a task of creating an encyclopedia of the world around them. She's not happy about it. She isn't a gender fluid. I'll slip into she just because they are, they're genderless, but I might say she. They. I should get used to saying they. So Foss, they don't really know what to do about it. They don't know how to to deal with it. They want to fight, but they know they can't. So they have to like learn what the world is and learn, well, what am I supposed to do creating, well, I don't even know what an encyclopedia is. This is the baseline of what Foss is dealing with. And then she happens upon one of the Lunarians during a fight, and then she is saved by another character known as Cinnabar. And Cinnabar is the weakest character in terms of hardness scale at a scale of 2. But her unique trait is that she emits a poisonous kind of liquid mercury or quicksilver throughout her body. It like kills plants, it stops arrows and just melts them. It can basically destroy anything it touches. So she's she was given the role of Night Watch when other gemstones are sleeping to conserve energy, since they're solar powered of sorts. They patrol the night and make sure nothing happens, but it leads to a bit of a solitude. So Cinnabar is by themselves. Foss sees this, and they would tell Cinnabar, "Hey, I will give you something to do. I swear to it that I will give you something to do. I don't know what, but I will." So Foss, they go about their merry way, and the story will proceed from there. I don't want to give up like the other plot points. Like I said, there are about 5 major story arcs in these 12 episodes, and the general gist of the first episode is that Foss learning what an encyclopedia, like learning about this world that she kind of really, that they didn't really care about much, but this spectacle of these gemstones fighting this Lunarian threat, learning what this threat is, and well, how do you deal with it? But along the way, dealing with other gemstones, because some of the gemstones are just there as background players. I'd say there's about 3 or 4 more that are more engaged into the plot. One being Rutil. And Rutil was voiced by Shelley Kayleen Black. And I mentioned before ADV films. And, you know, the split into Funimation or just doing Sentai Filmworks. Kayleen Black has been in pretty much every ADV film, whether as a main character or a like higher end background player. And I know her voice basically by heart at this point. It's one of those like softer but stern voices that you just hear, and it's just like, oh, I know who this person is. So she was in I don't know how well known it is anymore, but it was in a show called Noir. It was by the studio who did like Dot Hack Sign and stuff like that, but they also did the series of shows called The Girls with Guns in the mid 2000s with Noir, and I'd say it's Madlax. Yeah, it was Noir, it was Madlax, and it was Cazador de la Bruja, right? Kayleen Black was the main character of Noir, and I've pretty much heard her voice in any like ADV or Sentai Filmworks, anything. Her character in this, Rutil, is that of a doctor. So she doesn't do a lot of fighting per se, but she's kind of that second in command sort of thing where she's a weird doctor. She knows how to reattach severed parts of the gemstones' bodies back to themselves. So Rutil, they put them back together, and it's a unique. And I've been saying unique. That's my buzzword for this episode. Something I learned early on was that if you get hurt, if a gemstone gets hurt, Rutil can reattach them. But if you lose a part of your body, they lose a part of their memories as well. So it's really important that every piece of their bodies gets reattached so that they stay intact, because they're essentially immortal, but they're being attacked, and if they don't have anything to reattach their body to, then it becomes a dire situation. So Rutil is the, for lack of a better term, town doctor. she's considered a very strange doctor, and sometimes a little too much into the comic relief, but you can also come to them for like some serious drama, like later in the night when there's nothing else going on. A lot of the characters talk to Rutiel, and Rutiel has been around some of the longest of any of the characters, so they know a lot about what's going on, but they don't know everything. They are almost as in the dark as everyone except Sensei, of course. But Rutiel is another one of those characters that you'll see in every episode, and it fits an important role because how do you put back together an immortal being? Well, they learned how. The last characters I'll talk about are Diamond and Bort. Early on, their episodes take center stage, and they also get a lot towards the end of the show. They are classified as level 10. So Diamond and Bort, of course. I think there's other ones like Yellow Diamond, but Diamond and Bort, they are the best of the best. Maybe not the best fighters. Bort specifically the best fighter, but Diamond is the most precious of the luxury gemstones, and they make it a point whenever Diamond is on screen. The visual of Diamond's hair, that's kind of the signifier of each character's gemstone, is their hair design and their sparkle, and they have this like silver / rainbow effect with Diamond that is just so gorgeous. She lights up a room. It's almost like a glow in the dark, like one of those nightlight things, right? It glows in the dark. She's so spectacular, she glows in the dark. The problem with her is that she's not as good a fighter as Bort, and she's actually portrayed as not a weakling, but forgotten. They can fight, but just not as well, and it frustrates them. So Diamond gets a lot of screen time as well as Bort does. And the last character I want to talk about is Antarctite. Same hardness as Foss, but the interesting idea is that when the gemstones get to wintertime, they don't have as much free sunlight to keep up their strength. So they're essentially solar powered. So what they do in most cases is hibernate in the school, or they call it a school. So they pick out a room and they put a lot of like sheets and stuff and just sleep. The person that protects them while they sleep is Antarctite, who is liquid form for most of the year, but when it gets cold enough, she actually gains the same hardness as Foss and yet is able to fight better. So it's kind of like this unique hardness scale where it's not quite a 3, not quite a 10, but somewhere towards the top the colder it gets, and she is there as just a ass kicking machine. There's less Lunarians out there, but there's still threats, and her job is to fight them off. I won't say why, because that would be disrupting the plot a bit too much, but Foss joins Antarctite later on, and they actually, I guess friendship wouldn't be the best term, but Foss and Antarctite work together against this winter hellscape, basically. So the first part of the show introduces a lot of different characters. You get a lot of the midpoints with Antarctite, and then you get towards the end with a different type of threat towards the end of the show. So you get 12 episodes. You learn a lot about this world that no longer has humans. The term that I would consider it would be, I remember one of the Admiralibus called it, they're the bones, the flesh, and the souls of humans. So that should stand to reason what happened to the humans. They don't know that, but it is heavily implied that each of the 3 beings houses part of what makes up a human being. of whatever remains of a human being. So the gemstones would be the hard bones, the structure of the human body. The admiralibus would be the fleshy part, the malleable part of the body that can move, and skin and muscles and things like that. And then the Lunarians would house the souls. But it doesn't harp on that. It is more of a grounding for as to why this post-apocalyptic future exists, why these gemstones even exist, why these Lunarians are even fighting them. Maybe they're fighting over pieces of the human soul. The anime doesn't go into that as much. I'm guessing the manga would. But speaking of the manga, I want to talk about... I'll go over this now. The thing that drove me nuts when I was watching this again was you have those plot points. You have your major set pieces, and then you get to the ending of the show, and it's not that it's a bad ending, but if you've watched anime for any length of time, you can kind of guess when a show, and this happens more often with light novels or the comedic shows, where you get to the ending of a show and then it does like a fade out, and then all the characters are talking and they're like, hey, we're gonna do more, we're gonna fight again, and we're gonna, it's like a cliffhanger. When you don't know if a show is going to be added for a second season, and in this case it hasn't yet, as far as I know, it's a red flag where the anime is basically telling you, go read the manga, we'll finish it there. I don't know how often of a trend it is, but it's often enough that I think people have started to get annoyed by it. I know I talked with a guy last week over a Discord server, and he said the same thing. He was just like, I hate that. I hate anime that can't end on their own terms, and they want you to go find another medium. Yes, the manga probably started first. In 90% of cases, it's the manga first and then the anime, or on occasion it's the anime first and then it's a manga version, right? But that's the exception. But when the anime doesn't have an ending, and I'm not saying this doesn't, but it's also like they leave a few things to be desired. The ending itself tends to be a problem because they build up a lot of things, but then you realize you only have like one episode to do it, and it feels like, well, what about this plot line? What about all that stuff with Cinnabar and talking about like her mission? They talk about it a little bit, but they're still focusing on Foss, and that's fine. I like Foss's transformation. That's huge. But it does feel, if you are going to watch it, be aware that there is kind of an ending. So, stick around to episode 10 or 11, and then episode 12 is kind of there. So, Cinnabar's journey doesn't get resolved. The other issue I would have with this show is that other than those 4 or 5 main gemstones, a lot of them are there, but not really focused upon. They're kind of side attractions, which is fine. You can't have everybody mean everything. But if you did have, like, say, a character that you were just like, oh, that's so cool, like, they looked better, or they were a cool character type, because all of them fit, like, different, like, they're either, like, goofy, or they're, silent types, or they're just jumpy, or they just have a cool design. Like one of them is called Euclase, and they look like, they have, like, blue/grayish hair, almost like Rutiel would have the brown and the orange look. And it's like, well, they look cool. Why aren't they in this more? That sort of thing. If you end up finding that you have a specific character you like, and you're like, well, why aren't they focused on a lot? It's because the 4 or 5 gemstones that they did pick get the most of the screen time. So that can be a blessing and a curse, I suppose. But with the negatives come the positives again. And I said before that the visuals of this show are some of the most spectacular. The gemstone idea is such a creative concept on how to create a character design, because it's not just the hair that signifies that character. When they get broken apart, say if they lose a finger or they lose their head or they just get blown through, you can see these gemstone kind of shine, and each one shines differently based on the color or the luster of that gem, and it's such a spectacular effect. It's got this weird subdued majesty to it, contrasted by the action scenes, which, given the dynamism of the 3D visuals give you a lot of these weird panning shots. The characters can run like super fast, or they can do these like jumping effects, any liquid style effects, like any cinnabar like poison effect, is just this awesome sheen and shine. But because it's 3D and CGI, you don't get the hand-drawn look. You get it's very snappy, it's very quick. So again, the running animation, the attack animation, you contrast that with what the Lunarians look like, these very stilted, still-looking cloud images that just fade into dust when they get destroyed. But the gemstones look these amazing luster effects. One of the later episodes, and one of my favorite scenes, is Diamond getting chased by one of these just monster things. And it's a stealth section. So, say like a Metal Gear Solid, like if you were to play Metal Gear Solid and do a stealth section in an anime show, imagine all of those dynamic like camera cuts, like a one camera view of Diamond trying to run away, and then they pan over to see this like gigantic monster that's breathing, just that sort of like vibe, right? It's so good. They do so well in giving you so much to look at when you're watching the show, that even though it does have some issues, the drama and what happens to these gemstone characters, it grips you. It's not played completely comedic, but it's also not played completely dramatic. So again, you get this like 60-40 or 65-35 split, where when they have those moments to have fun, they've earned it because they've been fighting so hard. They've been dealing with so many issues of fighting all these enemies. So they know how serious of a life they have, but they're not against like having a little bit of fun with the show. And the action, the comedy, and the drama all work together to give you some serious moments. But it all comes down to Foss. And I said before that in the beginning of the show, Foss tends to be this very squirrely, very slackerish type. Her journey is the show's major set piece. Because I said before that this show can be very serious in times. I won't go into as to why, but Foss herself changes. And she changes dramatically. But they also don't make it so, like, snappy that it means nothing. They spend a lot of time focusing on Foss's early, mid, and then later character development. But the way that they're acted, the way they process these changes, that is kind of the meat of the show, even more so than just the visuals and the action scenes and then dealing with the Lunarians. It's how does this weaker gemstone that doesn't know what its place is in this society, for lack of a better term, develop and grow. So if you end up liking Foss as a character, you end up liking the show in general, because Foss is the main viewpoint character. And that's what the show really relies upon, is Foss's uncertainty as a character and as a being to really drive the plot forward. Another big positive about the show would be the openings and endings. A lot of anime tend to do like really special looking openings and endings. They get like legit. They either have some of the voice actors do some of the singing, or they have like bands and independent artists and whatever do like songs developed for the show, and they do these like super special openings and endings. The cool particle effects and gemstone effects of the opening are really good. What I really like is the ending theme. It's this like really subdued, softer song, kind of dramatic and kind of sad. But the way they produced it, I remember a YouTube comment was like, it sounds like it was produced in like a cave or something. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the idea. It's got a lot of reverb to it. And again, the way the singer interacts with the piano effects and the symphony effects and the orchestral effects, it's this really subdued song, and then the choruses are like loud and jumpy, but still has this like, it fits the show so well. And then you see the visuals of Foss and Cinnabar kind of fading in and out, and these like liquid effects in the ending. I love that so much. I've been hooked on that ending theme for years, basically. I love going back and listening to that. So to conclude here, Land of the Lustrous is, as I said before, a unique show. Visual, story, tone, they're not so offbeat that they don't make any sense, because you get that sometimes. You get offbeat for the sake of being offbeat. This is more, the premise itself has a creativity at heart that you probably would never expect, and it may sneak up on you how good this show is if you're not familiar with it. I would definitely recommend this. It was one of my favorites of the past couple of years, and going back and rewatching it was really nice. It doesn't end on the best of notes again, but I think the journey to get there is still viable and super important. Of course, the manga exists if you want to read the manga as well, and I guess the show is kind of leading you in that direction, but the anime gives you so much to look at. It is a gorgeous looking show, and if nothing else, you're going to be in for a visual spectacle watching Land of the Lustrous. But that should do it for me. And again, I will see how my schedule works out. I'll see if I can get some guests now that I've figured out my audio situation for good, hopefully. If I get guests, then I'll change around my schedule. If not, we'll keep going with what I've got. Next week will be Super Mario RPG. That'll start October. And then we'll do the Big O. And the week after that will be MetaCon. I will go to a con in Minneapolis and, see how it goes and give my thoughts to it. I'm super thrilled about it. I get the weekend off, and I'll be able to do a rundown of going to a convention. It'll give me something cool to look forward to, even though like just going to a convention is great. But like I said, I have my schedule for October set up. If I change my mind and we get, something cool lined up first, in terms of guests or something, then I will do that instead. Otherwise, I was also tapped to do an interview on a channel known as Time to Interview. That hasn't been posted as of yet, but I did record it last night. It was a short form interview, but hopefully I'll be able to talk about that. It was mostly about shows like Konosuba, shows like Rising of Shield Hero, which I've talked about on this channel already. But I will link that once it gets uploaded. But I did that for another channel. That was kind of neat. So fixing all these audio issues helped me get extra stuff done for a different channel, right? So I'm helping to get my name out there. This is a cool thing that I've been doing, these podcasts. I'm really happy to be back in kind of that anime swing. And I don't know if it's everybody's cup of tea versus all the gaming stuff that I do, but it gives me something new to do. It gives me something to fill me with pride. You can hear that like I'm engaged in this community a lot and want to talk about this medium a lot. And I'm grateful that this podcast format gives me an opening to talk about it more. Again, I don't know how popular these episodes are versus the gaming ones. The gaming ones are actually some of my better performing videos, but you know, it's something different because I have the ability to try different things here and there, and I want to do different things. So this is like my secondary interest aside from video gaming. And Japanese RPGs and video games have a lot to do with anime and vice versa. So they interact, not counteract, they interact way more than you would think, and influence each other more than you would think. So I think this is a viable podcasting format to talk about all of those, but it still fits the channel profile. So I'm really happy, and hopefully people are enjoying these, like, game 1 week, anime another week, anime 1 week, game, or if I have to do stuff like the MetaCon and then do another anime, like, I'm not gonna stick with the format if stuff comes up, right? But this is how I want my life to proceed for the foreseeable future. I want, like, what I've got. And if these podcasts have given me, like, a lot more excitement, a lot more, because it's not just me sitting in front of a chair or sitting in front of a computer playing a game, right? It's not just me playing Persona rhythm games on Twitch and whatever. It's another way of getting stuff across that I enjoy talking about. I don't know. I enjoy it. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but if anybody's even interested at all, then I know that I'm spreading that joy to somebody else. Because I don't want these to come off as negative reviews. There might be times where I end up sounding negative just because they're going to be less interesting to me than, some of my favorite stuff. But I've tried, at least for the first 10 episodes or so, to be a positive podcast. Think of things from a subjective point of view, but also a positive point of view. So if nothing else, I want these podcasts to feel like they're fun and, happy rather than negative and just, you're pissed off all the time. No. If I am pissed off, I want to talk about why. So I don't think it's come across. I've a couple of people have already told me that they've been happy with the way the podcast presents itself. I want to get better, of course. Some subjects are going to be better than others just because of familiarity reasons, but these are fun because I'm engaged in them rather than they feel like something I have to do. And that's the fun, is I want this to be something that I want to do. Like, when Tuesday hits, I want to record and it feels fun. So that's part of the fun, is I have all these things that I like to do that fit the mode of the channel, but they all work together to give you that. What is Citizen Strife's channel? What is Citizen Strife Plays? Well, it's this stuff. What you see is what you get. I know what my wheelhouse is. It may not be for everybody, but for people who are interested in this stuff, I've got them covered. So that's what I'm able to do, is be laser focused on a certain subset of media and, dive deep into it. So hopefully that does get some traction, or if nothing else, I just keep enjoying it. But anyway, if you get a chance to watch Land of the Lustrous, it's either on Amazon Prime or specifically Verve and High Dive on anime services. If not, then there's many other things to watch. We have tons and tons and tons of things to watch in our daily lives. But if you get some time, you could find worse ways to spend your time. Land of the Lustrous was really fun to rewatch, and hopefully the next show I watch is just as good. But I'll see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.